I invite Shirrell E.F. Edey, the owner and executive chef of Chefs for Seniors LA South Bay, to help us on this topic. The topic will be building food system resilience in a post-COVID world. Welcome them to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations for being awake after lunch. I'm impressed. My name is Shirrell Edey, and I'm the executive chef and franchise owner for Chefs for Seniors, LA South Bay. And, the clicker, here it is. I'd like to just really have a very casual but very important local brainstorming on building food system resilience in a post-COVID world. At the moment, we live in a world that's intertwined with inequitable systems from food to education to health and more, where problems are dynamic, multifaceted, and inherently human. Is there anyone here who had a career choice that's really kind of forced you to educate yourself on food systems? Show of hands. Yeah, I'm sort of in that same boat. I have to raise my own hand in that case. If it weren't for what I see on TV, social media, maybe, the news, it would really be sort of passé, like, okay, I understand that there are some issues with food insecurities, but, how does that relate to me personally? I'm able to go to my Ralph's, my local grocery store, and pick up the things that I need, not only as a chef, but, as a consumer. And so my chef life and love for culinary art has sort of drawn me a little bit closer to seeking knowledge of food system securities and insecurities. Unlike Wayne from EcoGem, Wayne, are you here? Is he back there somewhere? No, he's not here. Or Willie of Ward Laboratories, or particularly David of Grace Harbor Farms. They've been in the conferences. I've been listening to them thus far. Compared to their knowledge, my knowledge is quite infant on our food system and processes, both pre and post-COVID. However, the events of the last year have really, really opened my eyes to the reality that there is really something amiss in both our current U.S. and global food systems, but our preparedness in the face of global emergency is lackluster on a really great day. For the last 14 months, really since the huge announcement about COVID and the sort of imminent stay-at-home orders, I've had an opportunity to work on the front lines as an essential worker in the food service space. While providing services, I eagerly volunteered every waking hour at Dodger Stadium, which was one of the first and certainly the largest testing and vaccination sites. Between clients, I'm doing my chef work. I actually went and volunteered tirelessly in Sean Penn's organization, the Core Community Services, to do outreach and try to reach folks that had not been vaccinated, and I actually still do that today. And again, within the 4 weeks of the announcement of the seriousness of COVID and impending stay-at-home orders, the food insecurity issues went to an absolute free fall. I watched an issue that I saw periodically on the morning, afternoon, and evening news become front and center. The topics were in this order. It was like COVID, fatalities, no food, no water. It kind of went in that order. And it made me nervous. I started to think, okay, this is something that has to be addressed. Now, how we produce and consume foods has a bigger impact on our well-being than any other human activity. As you all know, the food industry is the largest sector of our economy. Food touches everything from our health to the environment to climate change to economic inequalities and even our federal budget. While some immediate and temporary fixes may have been executed, our future reality lies in the big question marks surrounding longevity and sustainability. There we go. Let's go back a couple slides here. The first one actually never came on. There we go. So for kicks and giggles, let's review the fundamental basics about the food system concept. So we have to start with growing. Obviously, it's gonna migrate to harvesting, and then our processing. So processing meaning transforming or changing that food into different forms of itself, essentially. Packing and distribution, transporting for consumer access, consumption or consuming, and then the disposal of those foods. I was gonna ask David, was I close, but I think he left the room. It's not only these three mandatory processes, but the inputs needed and the outputs generated at each of these steps. What is food system resilience? Well, let's define resilience first of all. It's the ability to prepare for, withstand, and recover from a crisis or disruption. Now, food system resilience is the being able to withstand and recover from disruptions in a way that ensures a sufficient supply of acceptable and accessible food for everyone. The food and beverage industry has developed a food system resilience to keep this giant, powerful, and very necessary machine operating in the face of unforeseen circumstances against all odds, including but not limited to climate change, global pandemic, natural disasters, waste, and economic inequalities. Having the capacity to produce nutritious, culturally acceptable, and sustainable food is critical to our survival. Additionally, having the ability to choose what we consume is equally important. COVID-19 has proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that we've got some serious changes that we've got to make sooner than later. Our system is broken and it's in dire need of an overhaul. The pandemic not only disrupted the food supply chain, but has also exacerbated the problems of food insecurity and malnutrition across the globe. Crisis, whether natural or human-made, can cause considerable damage to food systems and in turn to the ability of people to access safe, affordable food. Building more resilient food systems ensures a more continual supply of safe, accessible foods for all members of our communities, and change is critical to that. Accessibility and sustainability must be the lead change agents to build food resilience in our current state of the nation and in the world. Partnerships and synergy between governments, local farmers, food assistance programs, and crisis teams with combined resources can more effectively prepare for and respond to crises that disrupt food security for their residents and ensure a secure food supply for our future. In essence, building a food infrastructure, that's a word that I came up with, a food infrastructure, to assist current disaster preparedness plans. COVID-19 has made it clear there needs to be a better supply and demand management when facing these crises. An adaptable system requires many changes, from digitization of operating systems to innovation and more transparent data systems, which is what Ron was just discussing, to improve distribution of food to where it's most needed most quickly. Investment in processing and logistics infrastructure closer to farms is key, sparking sort of a redundancy back into the system. So if we can work with our local farmers, work with our local agencies, come together with a contingency plan, it then creates a sort of a cyclical process that we can continue to reproduce. And we shouldn't necessarily try to fix the existing system, but rather design new structures that nourish us and build on existing relationships within the current food system. You can design with dignity and agency. This is important because the resilience depends upon the resiliency of those who power it. What do I mean by that? The essential workers who make the food system run are at the greatest risk of illness and the lowest ones paid. The reality is that many of these people are of color. Society's racist systems, including food, have marginalized Black and Indigenous people of color and left them more susceptible to the health and economic challenges of COVID-19. The pandemic demonstrates how essential these individuals are and how tenuous their livelihoods are. Given the nature of their work, it is impractical for farmers to maintain the social distance necessary to protect themselves. And for some employers, personal protective equipment is too expensive to provide. Solutions have been swift and well-intentioned, but short-term, unfortunately. Some restaurants created campaigns raising money to cover employee costs, and Portugal extended temporary residency to micro farmers so that they can access health care. Workers will need employment that can withstand advancing technologies like automation, which will require training and new set of skills which will help them in their future. This is not just a food crisis, but an education crisis. The interlinked nature of our systems means that solutions must have broad scopes and address multiple factors to be sustainable. We have an opportunity to design for dignity and agency. No one knows what's going to happen, but as today's system demonstrates, we know our actions will have impact for years to come. By designing for adaptability, trust, dignity, and agency, we can build a more resilient food system through incorporating what already works. I found that attempting to provide food during the pandemic to our senior population was a challenge as a chef, and quite frankly, as a human being. That led me to understand that there was a need to have some structural changes, some infrastructure issues that needed to be addressed in order to stop the madness, if you will. I was personal witness to the food banks running out of food. People being in line for hours trying to just get a box of food to feed their families. And then the chaos started to happen a couple of months into that. People were cutting lines, taking food from each other, and unfortunately, we had some unsavory individuals that were trying to sell the very food that they had waited so long to get it, to receive from the food banks. And then we had the connectivity disconnect, if you will. So the food was available. However, there wasn't transportation, there was no mechanism to get the food out to the people where they were. So what if you can't get across town to that food? What happens? You're dealing with malnutrition. You're dealing with homelessness and people that have children that are living on the streets without food. This is an issue that has to be addressed. We have to build back better. I've got a video I want you guys to watch about regenerative agriculture.
I'm Attila Kökény from Hungary. We are standing here in Kerekharaszt. This is the field of the Econovum Kft. We have 700 hectares of cereal operation. Corn, the main crops are corn, sunflower, wheat currently. And we try to transform our operation to a regenerative agriculture operation. So I started farming about 10 years ago, and I started immediately with the regenerative agriculture practices. Because when I start to work with the soil, I recognize this is not the soil. This is kind of dirt. So it didn't have any life in it, any structure, any living creatures in it. And I wanted to change my soil to a living one. So with a very high humus content, much of carbon, a good soil life. So I wanted to have a fertile soil instead of what I got from the farmers. And I started to find methods all over the world which are capable to change the soil and change the environment as well. And where I find these methods in the States, the United States, especially in North Dakota. And I learned a lot from farmers like Gabe Brown, who is one of the main representatives of this regenerative agriculture. And I try to adapt his methods in Hungary as well. So what we see in the operation of Gabe Brown is he increased the organic carbon content of his soils from 1.9% in some fields to over 10% within 20 years. So it's a proof that the regenerative agriculture practices are working. And what is the regenerative agriculture? It's basically a method which tries to imitate the ecological cycles and the ecology of the grasslands. That means we first try to grow cash crops on the fields, let's say corn, sunflower, wheat, soybean, whatever. And after, we try to plant cover crops which should give the diversification to the soil, which helps to improve soil life. Then we leave these cover crops on the surface, or just roll down, and we plant the next crop into this moist surface. And from that point, we have a lot of benefits because we have better moisture management on the fields. If we have a rainfall, that rainfall could evaporate in the soil or infiltrate in the soil, and it slows down the evaporation during the season. Then if we could integrate the animals into the operation, grazing of the fields during the winter time, autumn, spring, we have the additional benefits of the animals on the field, and also improve the farm profit as well, if we can sell the beef. So what I see in the regenerative agriculture, so this is an almost sustainable way of farming. I mean almost sustainable because if you need gasoline or fossil fuels in the farming, it cannot be sustainable by itself. But at least we try to be as sustainable as we could, use less gasoline, less fuels, less work, and have still good profit and yields.
I found this video extremely interesting because he took what, in my mind, was a very complex subject and turned it into something very, very simple, very, very palatable, something that I could take a look at, understand the purpose of regenerative agriculture. It's a way that we're able to replant and use the proper methods of planting soil so that the plants that we grow actually give back to our environment, and it creates this wonderful circle of regeneration so that we can continue to use our natural resources. This is not something I had an interest in any way, shape, form, or fashion when I went to culinary school. I wanted to cook. I wanted to learn recipes. I didn't realize that maybe the fact that I didn't use a compote for those wastes, the ends of the celery stalks, the stems of strawberries, being able to recreate and use waste to build a better environment. And so it's something I've had an opportunity to learn in the last few months, if you will, and over the last year probably. So because, very honestly, of my infant knowledge about regenerative agriculture and building back into a sustainable and resilient food system, I wanted to turn our Q&A into more of a chat, because I feel like knowledge is power, which we also just discussed, and I wouldn't be doing myself a service if I didn't ask other people in the room who I feel like are professionals in this industry to answer some of these questions to help me be better and learning more about developing a resilient food system. So my first question is, what are some design ideas that would help with building food system resilience? I don't know if anybody has an answer to that question that's still in the room. I know a lot of folks have left. We may not have any persons that'll answer. Any answers to that? That's okay, I'll go do some more research. I'm gonna learn about this. It's becoming more and more interesting. And this conference has certainly increased my intention to learn a lot more about sustaining our current food supply. And then I'd like to know how we can honor and appreciate essential workers responsible for the foundation of farming and food production. Obviously, I want to know that because I ended up being one of those essential workers. Everyone in the world had a stay-at-home order. I'm sorry, I've not been at home a single day since the pandemic started. I mean, from day one, hit the ground running, knowing that the service I provide with Chefs for Seniors was going to require that I get out there and meet these seniors where they are. I even went so far as to do a personal fundraiser so that I could raise money from private donors to go and feed homeless seniors and meet them where they were. They did not have to be my Rolling Hills Estates clients. I didn't require that they be my Manhattan Beach clients or my Redondo Beach clients or my Cliffside clients. If they had a blanket and a corner and they were hungry, it was my job to get food to them. However, I'm one person. And I feel like we as a community have to get together to reestablish, rethink, and redesign our food security and the resilience that it's going to take for us to continue the process of being able to get food in the face of disaster, because apparently we were prepared for maybe a few months, okay, of the food insecurities during COVID. We were not prepared for 14 months, 16 months, and where we are now. We're just now getting into a place where things seem to be getting back to normal. However, the reality is it has taken much more than, it's taken a lot more than throwing money at the idea. We've actually had to put our heads together and figure out how we can pool our resources together, get people on the ground, deal with volunteers, have people going out and giving services. Additionally, we also have to remember that many of these people, of the people who have food insecurities, are not like the people in this room. Obviously, we've been able to afford to get here. We have our hotel rooms. We had a fantastic lunch. We're going to go out and get in our Ubers or get in our rental cars or get in the cars that we drove from whatever prospective cities that are near and go comfortably to our homes. Many of the individuals who are on the streets right now are still facing those same food insecurities. We have to figure out what the next step is. Is leaning on a plant-based diet a sustainable start? If so, why? Is it because we need to develop and grow more plants so that we can feed animals, so that they can breed more animals so that we can continue the destruction of those animals? Or is it because creating a plant-based food regimen is better for our health and because it's better for the environment? I'm not saying that we all have to turn into vegans today. Clearly, I had a cheeseburger yesterday, but it was an Impossible Burger. So maybe, I'm not saying that was great either, but certainly a more healthy form of a plant-based diet. And does the system need to be rebuilt? Not necessarily. Let's put it in the mind of remodeling a home. So when you get your permit from the city, okay, they tell you that it's not considered a rebuild, which doesn't take so many resources because you leave a single wall up. And then you build that house again around that wall. So I think it's better to say, suffice to say, that we can remodel the system by using what we currently have in place. Put our heads together. Let's put our resources together. Let's partner with the local farmers, with our government agencies, with people that have the distribution and transportation trucks, and let's figure out how we can be more sustainable together. And most importantly, please consider being a philanthropist. People think, oh my gosh, philanthropy, I've got to be a millionaire to do that. No, absolutely not, you don't. $10 to a local food bank, $5 to a local food bank. That cheeseburger that you bought, that Starbucks coffee you didn't finish, that can be something you can give to a person that may be on the street that may need something that you have that they don't, and they're happy that you share. Please consider giving your time, your resources, things that are in your home that you consider throwing away. Maybe donate those things to Goodwill. Maybe if there's a blanket that has a hole in it, or you've replaced it with that new fancy set that you got at the Macy's one-day sale for 4th of July. Lay that blanket on the person that's on the street that may need something to keep them warm at night. Consider giving back from your heart. That's it for me. Thanks, guys. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. Hopefully I can answer it. I told you my knowledge is minuscule in comparison, but I'm happy to do my best.
Hey, no, not on this case. I think you're doing God's work.
Thank you.
One thing I have to ask you, especially from your position, you were talking about a lot of areas in the country that are afflicted. You know, you're not talking about some soccer mom going and buying expensive stuff at Whole Foods. I think that everyone's talking about a post-COVID environment, but I don't know if we're taking seriously enough this Delta variant, which is already really impacting communities I just mentioned in a big way. So how are you considering that going forward? You know, I think a lot of people are letting their guard down, where I think we're going to have a lot of localized outbreaks, which are going to lead to, you know, the kind of stresses you were talking about.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, you know, when you're on the side of the road and your car's overheating and the steam is spewing from it, it's an urgent issue. Well, once AAA gets there and the steam is cooled down and you go home and you go, well, you know, I'll send it to the repair shop later, I've got another car. It doesn't become, the urgency dies down. I think that's where we are right now. I don't think that, unfortunately, I feel like the urgency is going to become, it's going to take a back seat, but I think it takes each individual to keep those subjects at the forefront, that food insecurities are still very real, and that doing your part to rebuild a post-COVID resilient food system is up to all of us, as well as I mentioned, the giving portion of it. You know, a lot of times, yeah, money can solve a lot of things, but if you don't have the manpower and the resources to get out there and disperse those funds as they need to be, whether it be for food or supplies or hiring the right people who have the right ideas about how we can rebuild this infrastructure as it relates to food, then we're going to end up right back here in 2 years' time, and who's to say that COVID doesn't pick back up or will be our next disaster. So I agree with you 100%. Go right ahead.
What you're doing is very much so as a caregiver in a lot of ways, right?
Absolutely.
We all understand the realities of caregiver fatigue, especially during this time. You're working with a variety of different seniors and putting yourself in a variety of different environments during COVID. You know, as someone who's not directly caring for my own parent or somebody else, what would be the single greatest gift or benefit to you during this kind of time? People doing what you're doing, from people that maybe are in a position to appreciate it more than we are directly to help in caring for those people.
Hopefully I understand your question correctly in that what is a benefit to me, or how can I provide this service, and how can the caretakers that are not present assist me in caring for their loved ones? Do I understand you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
What you need from the world to be more whole in what you're doing with this work.
That's probably a 6-part question, but I'll do 1 and 2. If we could realize that our seniors are precious, they paved the way for us to get where we are. Spend time. It's not really even a financial thing. If you have an elderly, even if it's an elderly neighbor, or if it is your parents or your aunt or your uncle, take a moment, give them a call. Spend 5 minutes on the phone with them, send them flowers, send them a gift card to a local grocery store so that they can say, hey, Shirrell, we've got some extra money for you to go and buy extra groceries for you to make that, plant-based meatloaf or whatever the case is. I think that helping them age in place by being able to provide them love, care, attention, as well as healthy, nutritious, well-balanced meals is going to help me do my job. It's going to turn my product into more of a service, which I actually feel like we are a service and not a product. Doing welfare checks on your loved ones, helping them navigate technology. Take a moment to teach them how to click on that button to start that Zoom call, to speak with their grandchildren who they adore, who don't have time to spend time with them. Maybe donate to some of your local food banks. There's a host of services that are needed to continue the services that I provide. If you are interested in just donating in general, maybe you want to gift a week's worth of meals to your neighbor. Maybe it's not a family member. Maybe it's just someone you want to say, I'm going to give today. I would be the person that you'd give a call and say, hey, I want to gift a week's worth of meals. I send out one of my chefs, or I go myself, and I prepare meals in their homes, and I invite them to have that interactive cooking experience. It gives them an opportunity to bridge the gap between malnutrition and loneliness, because myself or one of my chefs is there in the home with them. We're creating a continuum of care that's, right after the doctors, after the medications, after the surgeries, after the walkers, after they've fallen and maybe, fractured a bone or whatever the case is. The continuum of care doesn't stop at healing. It stops with healing. It starts with healing from within. You can take medication all day long if you don't have healthy, nutritious food. So we're assisting with the continuum of care, and the more people that I can get to understand that will help me to do my job, hire more chefs, get our feet on the ground, identify the clients that are in need. And let's be honest, many people can't afford the service. Not to say that it's very expensive, but in the grand scheme of things, they're okay with that dry, packed food that's processed, that comes from Project Angel Food or from Meals on Wheels. They're not thinking, okay, I need something healthy and nutritious. They're thinking, I just need to eat. It's very different when you look at the dynamic of not just eating, but paying attention to what it is that you put in your body, having a choice about what you put in your body, and then creating life longevity based on healthy foods. I hope I answered your question. Any other questions? Very nice to be of service. Take care, guys.